Just how much is on the line this week for Buffalo's quarterback Shedeur Sanders at the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine? And did the Los Angeles Lakers expose a potentially fatal flaw for the Denver Nuggets as it relates to the rest of this season and the postseason? All things to come on today's rundown, and we begin on the gridiron, where the entirety, or I suppose the select few within the college football world who are preparing to showcase their skills to NFL scouts, coaches, general managers, and the like at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. There is an exception to that rule in Shedeur Sanders, who has now announced that he will not be throwing or working out at the combine. He will instead focus on team interviews and medical evaluations and things of that nature. And so it brings up the question in my mind of just how much is on the line for the Buffs quarterback, who is projected to be the top or top two quarterback taken off of the board this year in the NFL draft. And speculation says he probably won't fall further than 6. But I do think there is that uncomfortable wild card in the room about the narrative surrounding Shedeur that has actually very little to do with his on-field product and production. And that being the shadow that is cast over him by the widespread influence and gravitas of his father, Deion Sanders, and Coach Prime, who's been with the Buffaloes now for 2 seasons. And it's not just become whispers at this point about speculations from fans and media and the like. We are now having legitimate intel on teams who may be raising concerns about drafting Shedeur due to the impact and the influence that his father, Deion, has had. Now, Coach Prime has coached Shedeur for the entirety of his major football life, from Jackson State and now to CU. And as of now, that won't be continuing after this point, as Shedeur is ready to take a leap to the NFL, and Coach Prime seems entrenched for the moment, still here in Boulder. But that separation, that divorce of head coach to quarterback, is not quite enough for, it sounds like, certain teams around the league, including the New York Giants, as we got intel coming from Paul Schwartz of the New York Post, saying he has concerns. Quote, "There is concern that Shedeur has been coached by his father since high school, and the Giants, the New York Giants, saw firsthand the video-centric, everything gets documented ecosystem created at Colorado and the spotlight that both father and son seem to crave." That is coming from Paul Schwartz of the New York Post, who was reporting with what he is reporting as direct insight and intel on the situation there in New York. And if the Giants are feeling that way, I think you can be at least reasonable to speculate that teams like the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the New York Jets, the Jacksonville Jaguars, even the Las Vegas Raiders maybe are all strumming through some of these same thoughts in their minds as they prepare to potentially take a chance on the next quarterback of the future for their franchise. And I think for Shedeur, this uphill battle that he is having to climb, while on one hand self-inflicted, is going to be a big differentiator in how his situation pans out at the NFL level. And I say self-inflicted because, let's face it, that's what it is. Coach Prime took over the Colorado Buffaloes as a 1-win franchise, voted the worst or one of the 2 or 3 worst Power 5 football programs in the nation. And he turned that and took that and turned it into must-watch television, frankly, with very little to do with his X's and O's impact on the field, but because of his gravitas, his eccentric nature, his quotability, his masterful manipulation, Jerry Jones-esque manipulation of the local and national media. And he turned them, frankly, into a collegiate powerhouse in a new era of NIL. Now, did it translate to college football playoff berths and success on the field in that regard? No. But I think it's fair to say that from an attention standpoint, the Colorado Buffaloes were a powerhouse in college football. Their ratings continuously topped the charts week after week. Recruits were going to other schools' games against Colorado. Teams were scheduling their recruiting visits against Colorado to maximize the amount of atmosphere in the building. And it kind of felt like the Buffaloes were self-inflicted, giving every other team their chance at a Super Bowl every single week. And so I think that Shedeur, who has kind of been the embodiment of that and the physical representation of it on the field, but the ethos of it is from Coach Prime. He is the one who has built this kind of image on his back, and Shedeur has been the largest beneficiary of it. But that kind of goes away at the NFL level, if we're being frank, because at the NFL level, everybody's a bad boy, okay? Every NFL player was one of the best players at their collegiate program, and every one of those players in college was maybe the best player in the history of their high school program. So the further you filter out that level and degree of excellence, the less it matters who your dad is and what kind of entourage you bring around you, because they've all got that. These are all, even with the NIL era and Shedeur Sanders and all the money that he's making, buying, his offensive lineman cars and his dad a house, and he's driving a Maybach and all of that after 1 year in Colorado. NFL players do that every single year, or have the ability to, at least, especially at the high end. So I think for Shedeur, it's not really as much about what he has to prove on the field and whether or not he's going to edge out Cam Ward as the top quarterback taken in this year's draft, whether that's first overall or somewhere in that top 6 or so. It actually has a lot to do with the off-field aspect of drafting Shedeur and the attention and the gravitas that comes with being tied to Coach Prime, because his pocket presence, his accuracy, his football IQ, and his arm are not really things that are in question. And there are some who may question Shedeur's arm strength, and things of that nature. But Bryce Young went first overall in the draft just a year ago, and no one was questioning his arm strength at that time, or it certainly didn't impact him in that moment. Now, could you question Shedeur maybe for holding onto the ball too long? Sure. Yeah, and I think that that's something that's coachable and something that he's going to have to work on as he transitions to this next level. But there's no doubt in my mind that the off-field aspect that surrounds Shedeur Sanders is more potentially detrimental to his overall draft evaluation than what he's going to be able to do throwing the football in these drills, which is why I actually think it's a smart decision for Shedeur to not throw at the scouting combine and to focus on the interviews and the exams and things of that nature, and really use this opportunity this week to drive home the fact that at this point, Shedeur and Deion are two separate entities, and the risk or the danger of those two bleeding over and having an NFL franchise potentially have to wade through this murky aspect where Coach Prime, if things don't go Shedeur's way or Shedeur starts to struggle and falter, will kind of intervene, that is a non-starter and a non-factor. Because I think if he's not unable to convince that to these NFL teams at the top of the draft, it is going to definitely weigh on their mind in a class quarterback-wise that's not generally considered to be all that strong. Teams could easily look and say, hey, if we've got players at the top of this draft like Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter and the like, and maybe we punt on quarterback for one more year and wait for a stronger class, that realization in a win-now league does become more palatable if you don't have to worry about the potential circus that comes around with the helicopter parenting of Deion Sanders. So I think this is smart of Shedeur. I think that he can showcase everything he's going to need to showcase at his pro day in Boulder at a date still to be determined. And it's not like we haven't seen top quarterbacks among the draft classes over the years take this similar route. So while there are things that Shedeur Sanders does that make me kind of raise an eyebrow or seem a little bit diva-ish or superstar-ish, that things that come kind of in line with the Deion Sanders, the Coach Prime brand, and the family extensions of that, this I don't think is one. I actually applaud Shedeur for making this decision. And I think that if he does this properly, he can navigate or sidestep a lot of potential landmines as it relates to the NFL teams and their perception of him going forward. On the hardwood, we saw a pretty painful end to the Denver Nuggets 9-game win streak as Luka's Lakers found a way to dismantle the Nuggets at home, 123-100 in a game that, frankly, at times didn't feel like it was even that close. This was by far Luka Doncic's best game as a Laker. He had kind of struggled a little bit early on, especially because of the jarring nature of the trade. He was averaging under 15 points a game, but this time against Ball Arena, of course, because it had to be this way, explodes for 32 points, 4 of 9 from the three-point line, notching 10 rebounds and 7 assists. That's by Nikola Jokic standards, that's kind of a chunky, I guess in Nikola's case, slightly disappointing stat line. But for an NBA player, especially one of Luka's caliber, still a solid showing and kind of an unfortunate foreshadowing of certain things that may come. Because I don't know how you felt, but the way I felt watching Luka Doncic throw half court and full court lobs to LeBron James for easy layups or alley-oop dunks, it gave me a little bit of an unsettling feeling about what may be to come for the Denver Nuggets and for the Los Angeles Lakers and the Western Conference for the next several years to come. I think that this move has clearly reinvigorated a Los Angeles franchise that really, since their championship in the bubble, has just been reeling and listing and kind of struggling to find its footing and find a supporting cast around LeBron that's championship worthy. Well, at least last night's iteration of the Los Angeles Lakers would show that. They had 4 of their 5 starters in double figures, and they had 4 of their 5 starters eclipse 20 points. Luka with 32, LeBron 25, Austin Reeves 23, and Rui Hachimura, the once dubbed Jokic killer, with 21 before he left early in the game with what appeared to be some hip pain. So for these Los Angeles Lakers, it wasn't what they did offensively, as good as they were, that really kind of made me nervous as someone who follows and is invested in the Denver Nuggets. It was what they did defensively that I think should raise some warning flags around the NBA and especially over at Ball Arena. Because what the Lakers were able to do defensively by swarming Jokic underneath the basket and at his point of attack before he's truly able to set anything up, it flustered him. For lack of a better word, Jokic looked uncomfortable throughout the entirety of the game in a way that we rarely see him because he's always, as the chess master, 2 or 3 steps ahead, it seems, of everybody else on the court, even the players on the opposing team. This was not the case. And I think that Jokic, who at times we've definitely criticized for being too passive, they forced Nikola into being too passive, I think. And that's why you get a result where Nikola Jokic, in a game where they lose by 23 points, only has 2 baskets on 7 shot attempts with 6 turnovers. Anytime you're going to see a game where Nikola Jokic has almost an equal amount of turnovers to shot attempts is probably not a good recipe in the end for the Denver Nuggets. So what the Lakers were able to do defensively, it actually wasn't all that complicated if you think about it. It was the ethos of, we are going to swarm Nikola Jokic. We are going to stop him and force everyone else on the court to beat us. And in theory, that's kind of the perfect strategy, I would think, from the Nuggets' perspective on how they would want a team to defend them. It's the equivalent of Patrick Mahomes going out and saying he loves when teams blitz him. Tom Brady loves when teams blitz him, because then he can replace the blitz with the ball and eat you alive because his decision-making is quicker than your ability to get to him. And with Jokic being the ultimate distributor, that should have been a recipe that fed into a Nugget strength, but it did not, because there was nobody else on the court who was able to consistently capitalize on Nikola Jokic dishing out to them after the swarming defense had collapsed. Christian Braun made some excellent plays defensively, I thought, in the game. Being challenged by Luka Doncic, one of the generational superstars in today's game, especially one who's right around the ripe old age of 25, already ascending as one of the league's best players. Being challenged by Luka Doncic 3 times in a single possession, as Christian Braun was, and stoning him 3 consecutive times, ending with a turnover, is frankly just more evidence that the fact that, one, Christian Braun is that dude. He's got the stuff, especially defensively. And offensively, I think he's proven worth his salt more often than not. And the team has so much more strength at times with him on the floor cohesively than when he's off of it. And that's evidenced by the fact that I believe Christian Braun had an astronomical plus 156 over the last month when he's on the court for the Nuggets versus when he's off. It's one of the best marks in the entire league. And one of the reasons why I think Christian Braun should be in the running for most improved player, more significant running maybe than he is right now. So outside of Christian Braun, Aaron Gordon, and moments of Jamal Murray, there was nobody else on that court at any point during the game who could capitalize on what Nikola Jokic needed his teammates to do in order to beat the Lakers. Michael Porter Jr. had another cold night from the floor, and it just didn't feel like he was ever going to get into a rhythm. Jamal Murray was testing the 3-ball early, and you kind of felt like maybe this was going to be another one of those games where he just lights up, and he has shown to be the guy that rises to the moment and rises to the occasion. But then you also, on the flip side, had a situation where Russell Westbrook was taking 17 shots. I need a game where Russell Westbrook takes 10 more shot attempts than Nikola Jokic. Like I need a hole in the head. Okay. Nikola Jokic is a passive deflector by nature as it relates to how he wants to run the offense, but he was too passive in that game. And if he's passive to a degree where it allows Russell Westbrook to take that many errant shot attempts, 17 in total for the game, that's never going to be a recipe for success for the Nuggets in the postseason, and probably not a significant one in the regular season. Because Russell Westbrook, let's not forget, was brought in to be the leader of the second unit, okay? And by that, he is inherently the sixth offensive option on the team. He is the field general, the sixth man off the bench who's going to run that unit and probably mixes in sometime in the starting lineup at the guard position. Russell Westbrook pretended like he was the first option for a lot of that game on Saturday night. And you saw what it looked like. He had a sequence of plays in the start of the second quarter where he missed a badly missed three, forced a shooting foul on the other end on the very next possession. On the very next possession after that, missed another wide open three. And you have to sit there and wonder if you're Russell Westbrook, why are these teams leaving me this open? And I saw a moment where he finally made a three. I saw a moment where he kind of shook his head as if to say, like, I can't believe they left me open to take that shot. Well, homie, they're leaving you open to take that shot because you miss it a lot, okay? And they want you to take that shot because more often than not, you're going to miss it. And we saw that last night. Russell Westbrook was far from the only problem that the Denver Nuggets had in a game where they not only never led, but even after getting it to within 1 point coming out of the in the second half in that third quarter and cutting that lead to 1 point, starting at 8 when it should have probably been 12, 13, 14, immediately LA is able to go on a 10-0 run. And you heard JJ Redick in the huddle and after the game saying it, their entire game plan offensively was to seek out open threes. The Nuggets gave it to them. They're one of the league's lesser three-point defending teams this season. The Nuggets gave it to them, and the Lakers cashed in on almost all of them. And it didn't matter whether it was LeBron or Luka or Reeves or Rui. It didn't matter because they had the cohesive plan on offense, and it was perfectly complemented with a stifling effort on defense. And I think this is where problems could start to begin for the Denver Nuggets. Because I think if I am Oklahoma City, if I am any of these teams, Memphis, in the West, who are going to potentially have to look at going through the Nuggets en route to a Western Conference final appearance, that is how I'm going to defend them from here on out. And some might say, well, hey, thanks to the Lakers for tipping their hand early and giving the Nuggets more time to adjust and adapt as the postseason draws nearer over these next 25, 24 games or so. I don't see it that way because I don't think it matters whether the hand is tipped or not. I think we've seen this Nuggets team struggle either through effort or lack of care to want to play defense anyways. And so what does tipping the hand matter? This is just saying, now we know you don't want to play defense, and that's going to make us lock down even harder on you while we convert on our end. So it's no longer you're going to get yours, but we're going to get ours, and we just have to make a couple of timely stops. That's how the Nuggets kind of operated during their title run, was that it didn't really matter how stifling their defense was for 3 or 3.5 quarters of the game, because in the final 6-7 minutes of every game, they knew they could turn it on. Their offense was going to stay on point. They were going to lock you down on a handful of possessions and pull away. I think this Denver Nuggets team still thinks they can play that way, but they can't. They're not built the same, and they don't seem to have that same fire and tenacity and passion that led them to that title back in 2022. And I think that the Nuggets, frankly, they got exposed, I think, a little bit. I think their 9-game win streak was a little bit of a fraud. And I think you heard that from Nikola Jokic, who after the game against the Lakers said we had a 9-game winning streak against teams that were injured and teams that were not really good or high in the standings. So maybe we tricked ourselves into thinking that we're playing good. And you know what? There probably was a little bit of that. There probably was a little bit of getting high on your own supply, kind of feeling yourself a little bit. You know, they were going for a 10th straight win, which had never happened under the Michael Malone era with Nikola Jokic on the roster. You'd have to go back almost 20 years for the Nuggets to find a time where the Nuggets won 10 consecutive games in a regular season. That streak was snapped, as was the streak of consecutive home wins in the regular season against the Lakers, which dates back all the way to April of 2022, believe it or not. The Lakers had not beaten the Nuggets on their home court in a regular season game since April of 2022. So I think this is a little bit of a harrowing Monday morning for the Denver Nuggets as it relates to the lack of production, meaningful production that they were able to get from their non-Jokic starters in a game where he was clearly trying to be the distributor and not the scorer. And then also how they were kind of exposed as being a little bit of a paper tiger with a harrowing stretch coming up over the next 4 games, culminating with a showdown against Boston, who's sure to be one of the top teams out of the East. This could be a situation where we see a lot of that positive momentum for the Nuggets sink back pretty quickly in another direction. No team during their 9-game win streak that the Nuggets faced currently resides in the top 6 seeds within their conference. That is a massive indicator that the Nuggets, who have proven to be able to beat good teams in the past, but as of right now, they look like a team that can beat up on teams that they're supposed to. And when faced against stiffer quality competition, they do tend to wilt a little bit. So I don't know. If I'm Michael Malone, I'm probably looking my superstar, Nikola Jokic, in the eye and saying, hey, Nikola, if we're going to make it out of the second round this year and avoid a second straight bouncing after we all know and remember what happened with Minnesota in Game 7 of last year's playoffs, I'm looking Nikola Jokic right in the eye and saying, I don't care if they double or triple team you in the paint. You've got to find a way to do one of two things. A, find a way to score and put the ball in the basket with someone with his size, frame, and intelligence level, combined with the underrated sneaky athleticism that he portrays on the court, contrary to national narratives. Or you got to get to the foul line. You got to start making them pay for that kind of physical tolling defense. You want to talk about getting a superstar whistle, which Nikola Jokic never has? Force the issue. Force the referees to give you those calls by getting dirty and getting muddy in the paint instead of dishing it out to a player like Michael Porter Jr., who at the moment just really isn't hitting at the degree that he needs to. When Aaron Gordon is your team's leading scorer, and I love Aaron Gordon, biggest defender of Aaron Gordon in the world. He's my favorite Nugget of all time. But he, as your 4th scoring option, should very rarely be your top scorer. And Nikola Jokic may not be a good recipe for the Nuggets to have Nikola Jokic shooting 25 plus shots per game, as we've seen him do in the past when he just has to try to shoot his way out of a perceived slump or out of a perceived deficit in any given game. 7 is just far too low. He's being too passive. And I think that it's so hard sometimes to criticize Nikola Jokic, who, by the way, had another triple-double through 3 quarters in this game. But this felt like a moment where he had an off game. He was uncomfortable and flustered in ways that we rarely see him. And I think it's okay to turn to Nikola Jokic in this moment and say, hey, you can't be passing the ball off like that every single time. You have to find a way to get to the basket when you're 2 feet away from the rim and either put the ball in the hoop or get to the foul line and force them to have to change their approach. Inherently, the Nuggets just kind of let the Lakers dictate the tone and pace of play from the opening tip-off. And yes, while it was close at times, you can't expect to survive a 7-game series where you are constantly fighting between 8 and 11 points down, getting it all the way back up to a single possession, and then watching it slip all the way down. That's just mentally fatiguing and emotionally demoralizing. And this, for the first time since probably the bubble, this has felt like a Lakers team that can truly challenge the Nuggets in a 7-game series. And I really haven't said that about many, if any, Laker teams since they won the championship in 2020, a game that if Mason Plumlee doesn't incorrectly switch and Anthony Davis doesn't hit that three-pointer, they may not even have that championship under their belt. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a member of the Lakers at that time, echoed that during his time with the Nuggets. All of that to say, I think that this was a little bit of a sobering realization for the Denver Nuggets as it relates to how far their season can go and what their ceiling is in terms of championship expectations in 2024, 2025. And I think that Shedeur is doing the right thing as it relates to the NFL scouting combine and how he's going to approach stepping out from underneath the long and dark shadow of Deion Sanders, his father, and preparing for the next chapter in the NFL. I have an expansive conversation about the Colorado Avalanche that I would like to get to tomorrow, because I think in similar ways to where we saw some concerns with the Denver Nuggets and things that could hinder them in the postseason of this year, I think there's been some evidence in the first two games post Four Nations face-off All-Star Week for the Colorado Avalanche that have some alarm bells going off in my head. I will see you all at the same place and same time tomorrow. I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.